Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Wendy Sachs, a member of the board of Plant Powered Metro New York. And as usual, we are thrilled to present bite-sized cooking tips from Chef Carole. Plant Powered Metro New York empowers people to find better health through whole food, plant-based nutrition. Using a food is medicine approach, we bring evidence-based guidance on nutrition, health, fitness, and lifestyle. This year, we have a new sponsor. So we welcome the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan to the show. And anyone here who's part of that community, welcome. Thrilled to have you join us. So, Carole, what's the tip for today?
Oh, Wendy, thank you for the introduction, and I'm always so excited to be here with everyone. We're doing date paste today, and it's just the simplest thing, but lots of people ask me, how do you do it? How do you know when it's, the right consistency? And I also want to just say that when I came off of processed sugars, white sugar, brown sugar, I had to make a substitute, right? And the best substitute, even over maple syrup, is date paste. And why is that? Because date paste actually has quite a number of good things for you. It actually is very high in fiber, so it's good for if you were to have any kind of constipation. It's very good for your skin. It has vitamin A and C, and it has quite a bit of it has magnesium and B6 and iron. So there's a lot of good reasons to eat dates. So what I want to do is I want to just show you how to make date paste. It's something that I always have in my refrigerator. I keep a container of it in the refrigerator. And what I do is that it's a very simple recipe, and you don't really need a recipe, honestly, once you understand what the consistency of dates to water is. But I know that for most people, it's very helpful to have a recipe. So usually the recipe would be 1 pound of medjool dates to 1 cup water. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio, but it's 1 cup to 1 pound. Today, I'm going to show you how I'm going to make half a recipe because I already have quite a bit. And the way that I store my dates, I actually buy dates from this company in Southern California in a town called Indio, which is right outside of Palm Springs. And I buy dates from a place called Shields Date Garden. And I buy 5 pounds, sometimes I buy 10 pounds, and I get them all at once. And then I put them in 1 pound plastic bags, and I put them in the freezer. That's my way of storing them. And that way it's more economical when I'm buying volume. And then as I need them, I take them out of the freezer. You can keep dates in your pantry on your shelf in an airtight container, but because I end up with 10 pounds, I like to just package it all away, put it all away, and try to keep it out of sight for me, because dates are a little bit of a trigger for me, and I want to just eat one and then eat another one. So what we do now is I'm going to make half a recipe. So half of a pound is 8 ounces. And what I would do here is I would turn my scale on, and I simply would weigh 8 ounces, right? And I have done that already. Okay, and then the next important thing that you want to do is you want to take out their pits. Now, if you are able to order your dates, you actually can get them without the pit. It costs a little bit more, but how nice is that to save the time from taking the pit out of the date? Okay, so what I would do is I would take all these dates, and I'm just taking the pit out, and I'm keeping the pits in my hand, and just quickly taking them out. And you want to be very careful. This particular date didn't even have a pit, but you want to be very careful, because there's nothing more frustrating and upsetting if you end up with a pit that's still in your date, and you put it into the food processor and you hear it banging against the walls of the processor, and you're like, oh, yuck. You're just like, can you believe it? There's a date in there. So it's one of those things where you just want to be really careful. And I'm also, just so you know, the dates actually have a little top from where they hang on the branch. And I'm also getting rid of that too. So not all of the dates have that. So what you would do is take all your dates and put them in a bowl, and then you're going to cover them with water. So a pound of dates, I want to just mention it again, 1 pound of dates to 1 cup water. But today we're doing 8 ounces, just 8 ounces. So half of a cup of water would be, I would do a half a cup of water. And sometimes they're very hard, these dates, and sometimes they're really, really soft. So that leads me to my next thing about the water, because people say, do I need to boil the water? And my answer is, it depends how hard your dates are. It depends how fast you want that date paste. So let's just say you need a date paste because you're in the middle of baking banana muffins, or you're making a cake and you don't have any date paste. So you want to speed along the process. So I would definitely boil the water and then pour it on top, okay? But today, this morning, I actually pitted a bunch of dates and I soaked them in the water, and they've been soaking for hours now. So they didn't need boiling water. So again, if you're in a hurry, definitely use the boiling water. And if you have, it's really nice to also use the filtered water. That is another thing that is good. And of course, you want to get rid of all that stickiness on your hands immediately, because that's awful. You know, you want to just get that stickiness. So then you would take your half a cup of water and you would just pour it over the dates. Now, these dates are not covered in all the water. They're almost, if I push them down, so I'm going to use just a little extra water. And it's actually not bad to use a little extra water, because if these sit on the counter for 30 minutes or 2 hours, or they even sit up for 4 hours, the water that is created from them sitting, the longer this water, if I were to pour off this water, I can show you how dark. Now, most of the dates have already absorbed all that water, right? But look how dark that is. It's almost like a syrup. And I definitely saved this water. I never, we're gonna mix that water in because I've already measured the water. But you never, if you have extra water like I've just put into this particular bowl, you wanna save that water and put it in an ice cube tray, and then you could use it for any time you need any kind of sweetener, right? If you wanna put a sweetener in your coffee or tea, or you're making a Thai sauce and you need a little bit of sweet liquid, that's the time to use that liquid. So what we're going to do is, I have a Cuisinart here with an S blade, and maybe some of you don't have a Cuisinart. Maybe you have a NutriBullet. Maybe you have a Vitamix. All those kinds of machines are perfectly fine to use. It's just that the reason that I prefer the Cuisinart the most is I don't have to dig at the bottom of a long, tall, vertical container, and I can see everything, and it's just easy to mix things up. So these dates have been soaking, and all I'm going to do is turn this on, and I usually pulse it a few times to get it going. Now, you want to really, the longer the dates sit on the counter, right, the softer and the smoother the paste is going to be. Now, when you're using a Cuisinart, you always want to have a spatula at hand. Some things go to the top, right, so you want to clean those pieces off. And there's still quite a number of very large pieces here. And you don't want it to be chunky, unless you want it for a purpose to be chunky. I don't know. Maybe you're just putting it on top of your oatmeal and you want it to be chunky. But if you're using it in any baked goods, you really want to mix it. And you're ultimately looking for a very smooth consistency. And it really, sometimes your dates are hard and they've soaked up all that liquid and maybe they need a little bit more water. It's really okay to put a little bit more water if you need, but most of the time you don't. So I'm just saying that you just want to be patient here. And I'm happy about the sound because there's no pits. This is still really, really chunky. So therefore, I'm just giving it a little bit of mix. Of course, if you do the 1 pound, you'll have way more mixing and it will probably actually be better. And I can't talk. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like. It's still a hair chunky. So I really actually wanted to go for another minute. And I guess I want to say you have to be a little bit patient. There are times when I'm not patient at all. And because I'm in a hurry. See how this is still a little bit chunky? So that's definitely your date paste ready to go. But I find that the more you grind it, the more you puree it, right, and let it go, the smoother that the results are. And then when in your baked good, you don't see any brown big dots of dates. And you've really macerated you've really gotten all those dates so that they're blended. So let's just give it 30 seconds more. Now you can use a little drop of water. And then it's done. That's it. Now, a lot of questions that I often get asked are, what are the substitutes? Can you use date paste exactly for the replacement of sugar? And I'm going to quickly say that baking is a science. And once you start messing with one ingredient, you end up affecting all the other ingredients. But if you're just replacing a recipe that says 1 cup of granulated sugar, you can really use, pretty safely, you can use 1 cup of date paste. So it's a pretty good replacement to just take out that processed sugar and substitute it for the exact same amount. Now, if you're replacing maple syrup, you're starting to mess around a little bit, and you probably are going to need a little more date paste than maple syrup. So if a recipe calls for 1/2 cup of maple syrup, you might want to go with about 2/3 of a cup of your date paste to replace your 1/2 cup of maple syrup. Okay, so it is something that you have to experiment with, and especially when you're baking. So what I do, and I'm going to advise you all to do, is if you're messing with a recipe for the very first time, just make half. Just make 1/2 recipe, and that way you don't mess up, and then you look at what you've got and you say, okay, that's going to need to be a little less sweet the next time, so I'm going to put in a little bit less, or it's not quite as sweet as I'd like and I'm going to put a little more. So that is my tip of the day. We are going to take this out. Another question that people often ask as well is, how long does the date paste stay in the refrigerator? Well, for me, it doesn't stay long enough. I go through it very quickly. But if you are making a container, I always put it in a jar, and then I put it in an airtight container, and I always label it so I know the date of when I've made it. It could keep for 2 weeks in your refrigerator, and possibly longer, but 2 weeks is what I would recommend. And then let's just say you're a person that hardly ever uses date paste, but you want to have the sugar, the date paste already in your refrigerator so that you have something to go to. right? Like you're just gonna want to have that sweetener once in a while, right? Then what I would suggest is you put it away in tablespoon portions. You could put that in ice cube tray and freeze it, or you could put it in little foil containers. But I would just put it away in small tablespoon form and just put it in the freezer. And then when you're ready to use it, just let's just say you're making spaghetti sauce, and everyone knows that a little sugar goes in the spaghetti sauce. Why? Because it's got a lot of acid in that tomato sauce, and often it needs a sweetener. Well, sometimes I put a carrot, and sometimes I actually used to sprinkle just a little bit of sugar. And so a little teeny bit of this sugar water or a little bit of the date paste is absolutely perfect. And if you have this go-to as something that's already made, you'll be less inclined to go get your little teaspoon and try to go into some other kind of sugar that's not as good for you. And that is my tip of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carole. We have two questions. One is, when you're measuring for the recipe, is it still 1 pound dates if the dates are already pitted?
Yes, you know what, I usually, again, when I did the weighing out of the dates today, I give it a little more than 8 ounces. It doesn't matter, really. It's so little bit. I know it's hard to believe coming out of my mouth because I'm so precise about everything, but don't worry whether they're pitted or unpitted. Just approximate the pound of dates. If it's a hair drop more, a hair drop less, it's really going to be okay. And moisture, it's like when you're making bread, right? Every place you are that you live has a different. In New York City, it's very humid, right? Where I live now, it's very dry, so it would be not surprising that something needs more water where I live because things are dry. And sometimes I get that whole big box of dates and they're really, really soft, and there's sometimes when there's a few ones that are just really dried. So it's more about looking and seeing, and which you have to do when you're cooking anyway, and learning to find what is the exact right consistency. And I just want to show you how that looks. Okay, that's how beautiful, how smooth and beautiful that looks. Okay, and I just give you a recipe because I know it makes people happier to have something to start with. But eventually you'll be so good at this that you'll say, oh, I'm going to soak 3 dates in a little bit of water. I'm just going to make a teeny bit. You'll figure it out. Okay.
That's awesome. Another quick question, and just relaying a comment. One, I love that you can use dates for sweetness in sweet things, but also in savory things. And Mitchell from Long Island, who Mitch Costell, has said in the chat that he puts date paste over sweet potatoes, which is also a kind of fun added taste.
I guess it's just like what people do at Thanksgiving when I freak out that they put brown sugar on top of their delicious sweet potatoes. At least a whole plant-based. So this is really the fiber, right? And this is the real thing. So if you're adding more sugar to your sweet potato, this would be the way to go. And even when I marinate tofu, Wendy, you've watched me do it a million times with orange juice and garlic and and sometimes in the past, in my past life, I would put a little bit of honey or a little bit of agave or something. And those are things I don't really use. So if you wanted to put a teeny bit of date paste with your soy and your garlic and your ginger, because that's going to help it all caramelize your tofu when you're cooking it, right? So I can't tell you how many times I use date paste in a savory dish, right? So keep that in mind, that it's not just for baked goods, right? I mean, I have some baked goods here, but it's not just for baked goods. It becomes, like when you would have your bowl of sugar on the table, right? Someone's going to have tea, right? You've invited them over and you're having a cup of tea. Instead of having that bowl of sugar that's red, this would be your substitute. Yes. A little teeny bit of date and just mix it in and it's fine. Or serve them the water that you've saved, That's going to sweeten your coffee. That's going to sweeten your tea.
Right. Another question, which I think is really interesting, is what are the uses, or do you use date paste in any way besides as a sugar substitute? So, are there like date uh, bars or date? Like, would you ever use a date as the ingredient itself without it necessarily substituting for sugar?
I'm just thinking out. It's a weird question, Wendy, a little bit. I'm
Well, I know one actually that just came to mind, which is there used to be a candy called almond something or another, and it was
Almond Joy, you mean?
almond joy, not the almond joy candy bars, but they're anyway. The something you can do is if you really want a bite of something sweet, is you take a date, cut it in half, and either add an almond or add a nut of some sort or add some nut butter. And then
Well,
that
I
in
mean,
and of
of
itself
course, I mean, we could have a whole
is
show
dessert.
just on dates, right? I mean, I used to stuff dates with tahini. Tahini is lovely with dates,
Exactly.
right?
Yes,
and
tapioca. Mhm.
so there's so many things that you can do with the whole date itself. But and today I made these seeded bars with dates, and I made these peanut butter cookies that are with dates, and it actually called for the whole date and not the date paste. But basically, if I only had date paste and I didn't have any, I would figure out the substitution.
Right.
I would just figure out how, like, I know that 8 ounces of dates is like 12 dates. 8 ounce, like, because I've done it so much, and I'm usually counting when I count and I put the seeds in, and then I'm like, oh, 8 ounces I have on the scale. Oh, I have 12 pits. Like, I always see how consistent that is, and it's pretty consistent actually. So
Awesome.
that means if you had a pound, you'd have 24 seeds, right? You and you would have 24 dates basically. Yeah, you would have 24 seeds and 24 dates.
Right. And some people are adding dates in salads for sweetness and other and
Oh,
texture.
and is it the
Yeah.
best in a dressing, right?
Yes.
Another go-to thing. I mix lemon juice, a little bit of dates, and a little bit of Dijon mustard, and that's a wonderful dressing. Just those three things. There's no fat in that. There's Dijon sweetness and a citrus, right? And that makes a delicious dressing.
Awesome. Well, I know this was meant to be bite-sized, but I decided we'll answer some of the questions. We've got one left, and we'll just do it super fast, so we're still under the half-hour timeline at least. Deglet Noor dates versus Medjool dates. Why do you use Medjool, and would you ever recommend Deglet Noor instead?
To tell you the truth, there are so many times when I've gone and gotten Deglet dates, and even on the Upper West Side, I used to buy them at the health nut store because they were always on sale. They're smaller, the Deglet Noor. They're harder, and they're less expensive, and they're less sweet. So the Medjool date is plump, sweet, and most ideal. But if you are really trying to save money and cutting corners, go for it. Just know that you are going to have to soak them longer, and yeah, you're just going to have to soak them longer because they're a harder date. So any date will do, but the Medjool date is the king date. It's like the king.
Excellent. Carole, that was just awesome. This is a staple for all of you that you can use in your refrigerator. And yeah, there's so many.
I worry, Wendy, when I don't have it. Like, I almost have a panic moment, just like when I don't have. Remember when you taught me when we were, no olive oil, and I thought I have to always have a dressing in the refrigerator. This is how I feel about date paste too. There are certain things you just have to have in the refrigerator. Date paste, dressing that's already made, Parmesan, certain things that just have to be there so that you don't have to worry about reverting back to something you don't want.
Absolutely. And what Carole said is just key for anyone who's either transitioning or already doing a plant-based lifestyle. The dressings and the sauces and these basic things that you keep in the fridge are really critical, which reminds me to tell you all that this coming Sunday, please join us. We have our monthly regular scheduled Cooking with Chef Carole show Sunday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, and that is sponsored by, of course, is presented by Plant Powered Metro New York, and JCC Manhattan will be again sponsoring us now, I think, throughout the year. So please join us. Also want to make an announcement that it's not too late if you sign up, I think tonight or by tomorrow, for our 21-day Jumpstart. This is an immersive program that is one of our key programs in helping people transition to a whole food plant-based diet, or if some of you just want and need extra support, please do join us. We have various scholarships available. So please join us for the Jumpstart. And then finally, we have a series with one of the all-time pioneers and leaders of the plant-based movement, starting February 2nd. Join us for a 4-part series about heart disease, led by Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and also by members of his family. And that will be partnering with the JCC Manhattan. So go to our website, which is plantpoweredmetronewyork.org, and you can find all the information, and please, go ahead and register. So you'll see other events, so please join us for anything that might interest you. And then finally, our beloved Chef Carole can be reached on Instagram at the Veggie Vanguard, and her email is Carole with an E at thevegievanguard.com. So hopefully we'll see you on Sunday. For those joining us for the replay of Facebook or YouTube, thank you for joining us, and hopefully you'll catch us on Sunday, 5 o'clock Eastern as well. Bye, everyone.
Bye.